Hello, my name is Tim Lahili, and in this video we're going to be reviewing the internet widget. We're going to do a simple overview of the widget, and then we're going to talk about domain groups. So let's hop into the tool. Okay, let's find the internet widget. It's right here, assuming of course you have the license. It should be in a similar spot for you. I'm going to open it up. You'll see the first thing it's going to do is filter on data that has URLs in it. So it basically is going through and looking, hey, do you have an active URL in your data set? And if you do, I'm going to filter on you. And in my case, there are 2,478 such items. And then that data gets further arranged into tabs based on the nature of it. We've got a domain tab, domain groups, which we'll touch on, searches, downloads, cookies, credentials, and time. In each tab, we arrange the data in the way we think is the most appropriate for that data. Here, we've got a pie chart and then a grid down below. The pie chart shows, I think, the 15 most frequently visited domains. I'm going to skip domain group for a second. Searches are just in a grid, straight sort of navigatable grid. You could go and sort and filter and all that kind of stuff. Downloads, again, just a grid. Cookies, much like domains, is a pie chart and a grid. Credentials, I believe, is also just a grid. And then ultimately time. Time is a little bit unique in that it's a graphing of the time of day that the URLs were visited. So not a timeline. The timeline is up here, but specifically the time of day, so morning, noon, or night. So you can see this guy does most of his browsing in the evening. The most frequent time is here, and that's 20.45, which would be 8:45 on a 24-hour clock. And he's visited 68 domains in that time. And then if you go slide a little bit forward, this is 66 at 9 o'clock, and then it drops off. And, you know, to the extent that type of analysis is of value. Most everything in the internet widget is interactive, except for this chart. This is not yet interactive when we are working to make it interactive. And it won't be too long, but in this release, it is not yet interactive. Let's go back to domains for a second here, and let me show you the plus and the X here. This allows you to filter positively on something. If you want to see these 309 visits to this boldchat.com, you can go ahead and click on it, and it will filter it. And then see it's now 309. You can remove that, of course, and you'll go back to the full data set. Likewise, you can do the negative. You can remove this 309 from your data set by clicking on it. And this number should drop by 309. And let's see, hopefully it does. Oh, and I think it did. Yeah, it was 8, it went to 9, so perfect. And we can obviously remove that. So those are all pretty self-explanatory. The timeline is also interactive. If I do shift and then scroll, I can zoom in on any one of these data periods. I can see this 416, if you will, URLs. I can also right-click on the timeline and change the grouping. It's grouped by day right now, but I could do it by week, month, or year. I can also show empty periods. What does this mean? A timeline is meant to show, obviously, the progression over time, but the problem is often in our data sets, there'll be one visit, let's say, you know, in 1970, and then another in 2010, and it creates for a very ugly timeline. So you have the choice to show or hide empty periods. Right now, I'm hiding empty periods. If I click on it now, I'm showing empty periods. And you can see the timeline stretched out a lot more at this point, and is maybe a little bit less navigatable but is actually now more proper in terms of the distribution across time. See, this is 2016, and then you have all the months or weeks or whatever the period is. I think we're going by days here, all the days that there was no activity at all. And then you can go ahead and remove that. Now you're no longer showing the empty periods, and everything should have a value in it. So the last thing to touch on is the domain groups. Domain groups are cool in that they filter or sort all the data that you have visited based on different groupings. You can see we've pre-configured it with adult sites, search engines. I don't know where these categories come from, but they're meant to be as relevant as possible to a typical investigative type activity. Let's click on search engines. I believe I have some there. You can see, again, a similar type dynamic to what we had in the domains area, a pie chart and a graphic with a plus and an X on it. The one particularly cool thing about this groupings is that you can change the groupings or add groupings by coming here to the config spot. And you can add a grouping by clicking on plus. You can delete a grouping by clicking on the trash can. You can edit a grouping. If you want to go ahead and add a search engine, you come here, and if your search engine is *Tim* that you want to add, you save it, and it will add that to your list of URL domains you're going to look for. And obviously you can see here you can delete names as well. Notice the wildcard options here. If you don't want to use a wildcard and do tim.com, then it will only get it when it exactly matches this, which is much less useful in my opinion than the star.star, or excuse me, star domain star notation. But I don't know what your use case is, and maybe you want to have a literal one, and you can go ahead and do that. And then once you've added it, when you go back to groupings, the new grouping will show up. Let's just do that here. Let's actually just create a new one. We'll call it demo. Well, let's spell it right. And then we'll just do star Google star, and then we're going to save that. And that created the grouping, and now you see we've got demo there. And then if we come here to groupings, we should now see demo. And so it added it, and we can go ahead, and if we want to, if we're tired of that one, we can go ahead and delete it, and it'll say, are you sure? And if you click yes, it will go ahead and remove it. The one thing to note here is if you don't like any of these categories and you want to delete them all, add a category, a grouping first, because it will not allow you to have no groupings here. If you remove all groupings, it will add the default settings all back. So a little bit annoying if you in fact want to get rid of everything, but just add a default, an empty group, and then delete the rest, and it will work for you. So anyway, that's the internet widget. Hopefully that's helpful. And as always, if you have any questions, post them, and I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for your time.